be louder than that. It's early in the morning, but we got to wake everybody up in this hotel. I said, good morning, Fall Retreat. Wow, take two, wow. Good morning. If you are outside, please come in for we are about to start the second session. Why don't you stand with us and let us worship the Lord this morning. Get a little energized, get a little boost.
Greatness in your get tired of rain. 'Cause you know me. 'Cause you live to be here. You love me. Like a hurricane. Like
Good morning, everybody. Yay. Yeah, thank you. Man, I'm still a little bit asleep. Is anyone else a little bit asleep still? Wow, no one? Oh, okay, a few hands. Good morning,
Good
Phoebe.
morning, guys. Good morning, Roman. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Well, this morning, Roman and I were just thinking yesterday, like, we're just getting to know each other and whatnot. And one thing that we do have in common is that we're both from San Diego. And we're, like, deep-rooted people in San Diego roots vibes. So we're thinking of, like, man, like, what is, like, our thing? And we're thinking SeaWorld.
It's got to be SeaWorld.
So
sorry.
Sorry. Yeah, we like. I mean.
Yikes.
But anyways, we grew up going to SeaWorld, and yeah, and so we have a friend
Yeah.
who needs to be awakened up today.
He's just a little bit sleepy, just like we are.
Yeah, and I think we need to be a little woken up today too.
Yeah, so what we're going to do is we're going to start like calling his name, but we're going to start quiet because we don't want to make him angry. We want it to be like a nice little wake up.
Yeah.
So we're going to split the side, and this side is going to be
So
share,
this is share.
and that side is
Moo.
okay.
So we do a little practice. So this is like the middle.
Yeah.
Right.
And if
This
you've
is the
ever
middle.
been to a Shamu show, you have to call him out. He just doesn't come.
Yeah.
You have to wake
You
him
need
up.
to call his name because he's sleeping. He's still in.
Right.
He's
a
still
little
in the hotel.
sleepy. So when we go like this side is going to shout or softly first. Share.
Share.
Moo.
Moo. Okay.
Yeah,
Can we
ready?
practice? Can we do
Yeah.
a little practice? Okay. Ready? With the left hand, we're gonna go. Share.
Moo.
Share.
Moo.
Okay. Louder. Share.
Yeah.
Moo.
Share. Moo. Share. Moo.
Share. Moo. Share. Moo. Okay. Wait.
Did he
We need
wake
to start
up?
over. We need to start
Okay,
over.
okay.
We need to
So,
get everybody on
I
board,
think
or
that
Shamu's
we-
not gonna wake up.
Yeah, I forgot to tell you guys, this is like his call. Like that's when he knows that we're ready. So you have to go Shamu, Shamu. Can I see everyone do this? Yeah? Well, I see like 4 people doing it. Oh yeah, okay. So we're gonna start this way, and then we're gonna wake him up like this. Okay, ready?
Okay, we'll start from the top.
Yeah.
Shh,
Ready?
guys, she's still sleeping.
Yeah, we have to wake him up.
Shh, shh. Okay, all right.
Share. Moo. Share. Moo. Share. Moo. Share. Moo. Share. Moo.
We woke up Shamu.
So hopefully now with our friend we're all awake, just
Yeah.
like Shamu is awake. now.
Sometimes we need a little bit of an encouragement to come out of our shell today.
Yeah.
So we encourage you guys to come out of your shell today. Come hang out, meet new people and whatnot, and be alive and awake like Shamu.
Yes, so alive and so
Yeah.
awake. All right, so we have a few things just to share with you guys this morning. First is lunch. So this is a great way to meet new people and pack your car for an adventure like we were talking about last night a little bit. Invite someone that you haven't talked to. Invite people that you do know. And just have fun with a full car. We're going to have food off this campus. And yeah, so it should be fun.
Yeah, and also adding on to that, we'll have posters indicating drivers who have spots in their cars for lunch. So that will be somewhere in the lobby. So look out for some posters for sure. And today we have free time. Woohoo! Check the program for what time and where. And specifically in that free time, we also have a rec time. So there are tons of options for what to do for your free time and whatnot. So there's a beach nearby, which is exciting.
Maybe you'll see Shamu.
Maybe we'll see Shamu together. Oh, that'd be kind of sick. But hopefully Shamu will be doing some flips out there. But we have rides to the beach. And so if you want to spend all day at the beach, there's a 1 o'clock gathering at the lobby. There'll be signs for the 1 o'clock. So if you want to spend all day at the beach, you can gather at 1 o'clock in the lobby, I think. And then put Mandalay State Beach in your map. So Mandalay State Beach, and that will take you to the beach, and look for some like crew canopies. I think there's like 3 or 4 of them standing up. Look for those, get under those, and that's where we're meeting. Yeah,
Awesome.
and then we have half day at the beach too. So if you're not feeling that full 5 hours, you can show up at the lobby at 3 o'clock for half day at the beach. And yeah, that will be at the lobby. And then there's going to be dinner at the beach. So if you don't even want to go to the beach, there's like dinner at the beach, which is included with your wristbands. So you should all have a little tag attached to it. And so that's your ticket to get your beach. That's included with like registration. So like we're gonna have tacos with a taco truck. And it's gonna be super good. So if you are just showing up for dinner, you can grab a ride at 5 o'clock. So quick review: if you want to do full day at the beach, it's 1 o'clock in the lobby. And then if you want to do half day, 3 o'clock. And then if you're just showing up for some 5. That makes sense? Cool. So remember, leave no one behind.
No one. behind.
Text or call Jamie if you do get left behind. So let's try not to get left behind, y'all. And we'll rescue you. Staff will rescue you. We will also have Kruber going back to the hotel every so often. So look out again for signs on the beach for rides for Kruber, and they'll bring you back too. Rec will have the annual Kajabi tournament from 2 to 4, so get pumped.
So pumped.
And there will be spike ball, cornhole,
Spike ball.
can jam, and so much more.
So much more.
So much more.
So much more.
Cool.
That's so awesome. All right, so as we transition to this next segment, I want to just talk a little bit about what Crew is and different opportunities that we have here. So Crew, as we know, is a big organization with a lot of different outlets, and we may know it as a ministry on campus where we go on Tuesday nights and maybe we have a community group, but Crew has a huge heart for things internationally and in other nations, and in the Bible it says, go out that every nation may know. And Crew has a big heart for that. So just to touch on that a little bit more, we have some people that are going to share. So excited. So I'd love to invite Molly up to the stage, and she'll tell us a little bit more. Woo!
Good morning, everybody. I'm so glad to see all your shining faces this morning. Okay, so I know, like, me personally, I have a few, like, getting morning in the reading, that did not make any sense. Getting ready in the morning, like, routines, and, like, I have, like, a 5-minute one, and I have, like, a 20-minute one, and then there's, like, a 40-minute one. How many of us use, like, the 5-minute one this morning? Yeah, that's right. So let's add one more thing to our morning routine. Let's just think that, like, every time you get up in the morning, you're going to go, like, brush your teeth. You got to, like, start some water on the stove to boil so that you have some clean water to drink for the rest of your day. Let's just add that into our routine and think about how much longer that would take every single day. After you brush your teeth, you get up, you're like washing your face, whatever, and you start some water on the stove to boil, and you gotta wait for it to boil so you have clean water to drink. And this is really, really important because if you don't fit that into your 5-minute routine, then you run the risk of getting your kids sick, or your parents sick, or your grandparents sick. And it's just a really real problem for a lot of people in the world. And so because of that, because we see that and we want to help people with their lives, we are partnering with Filter of Hope this year, and we are installing water filters for people in Cuba with Cuesta, and then we're going to Panama with Cal Poly. And so basically what we'll be doing is partnering with the local churches where we're at, and going out into the community and meeting people and knocking on doors and just giving them free water filters. And they filter 150 gallons a day, and they'll last about 10 years. And then if it breaks or if you hit the 10 years, then they can go and get another one. And so that is just a huge relief for so many people. Last year I went with Cuesta to Cuba, and Gretchen was with me. And we met this lady who, she was just in tears about the water filter, and she was like, I've been boiling water for 80 years, 80 years every single day. And so we were just so excited to like be able to take that, like just give her that relief. And then there's other people too, like we go into their houses and we share with them the water filter, and we're like, yeah, this is like amazing, and it'll last you 10 years, blah, blah, blah. And then you're like, but we have another gift for you as well, and it'll last for eternity. And that is the hope of the gospel. And so we share with them Jesus. And there's so many people who are so like longing for the truth, and it was just amazing. We were blown away by the ways that the Lord had prepared the hearts in Cuba. And we met this family, and it was like a family of 4, and a really sweet little boy who was like playing with us while we were hanging out there. And we give them water filter, and they're super excited about it. And then we share the gospel with them, and they are just in tears, just moved by the gospel and the way that Jesus touches our hearts. And so, and word had spread that we had been around, and so by the end of the week, we had had multiple encounters like that where people were just so moved by the gospel, and people in the community were coming up to us on the streets and asking us to come to our houses, and we're like, okay, well, like, do they know why we're here? Like, I don't know. And so we asked them, we're like, what do you think that we have? And they're like, you have water filters and you have Jesus, and we want you to come to our house. And so that was just moved me so much. I was like, wow, what a gift we have to share with other people. Like, how amazing. So I'm stoked to be going on the Filter of Hope trip with Cuesta, this time back to Cuba. And then we'll also be going to Panama with Cal Poly. And so I would just encourage you guys to look into more information on that. I brought the little demo. This is like a bucket. A lot of people have buckets in Cuba and Panama. And so this is the filter. It's really little, and it's really easily installed on a bucket just like this one. And we do like a little demo with them. We even like pour dirt in this thing with water, and then like it filters completely clear, and you can drink it. I can drink it. So, anywho, I really encourage you to look into it. It's an awesome opportunity. I'll be there, so it'll be awesome. And there's not only that one, but there's other opportunities. And so Jared and JJ are going to come up and talk to us about an opportunity for winter break.
What's going on, everyone? My name is Jared. I'm a 4th year at Cal Poly.
And I'm JJ, and also a 4th year at Cal Poly.
And we have the privilege of sharing with you guys our experience in the Middle East 2 summers ago. So a little bit of what that looked like. We were there for 6 weeks. We would start every day going to our Arabic classes. I thought it was super fun. JJ can vouch. I took it too seriously.
Dude, he was a pro at Arabic by the end of the 6 weeks, let me tell you.
Yeah, it was cool to be able to integrate that just in our time there and kind of jump straight into the culture. So after that, we would go to the university and talk to the students for a few hours. And that was just a way to connect to the people there. And it was really awesome because their religion is part of their culture. Most of them are Muslim, and it was not out of the ordinary to bring up God right as you meet someone. So after that, we would go home. We would have free time. Some people would go to the gym. Some people would take naps. I took naps. Some people would go to discipleship. We had that once a week. And then my favorite thing was actually just exploring the city. So just grabbing someone and kind of walking around. I think there, oh, no, we don't have, can you put up the classroom picture? Yeah, so on the right side is our Arabic class. And then, yeah, so exploring the city, just walking around in somewhere that's super unfamiliar was really cool.
And so we got to do all these cool things every day. And so the first week we got there, and Friday morning came around, and we realized like all of the shops are closed and everything's closed down. And we're thinking, what in the world's going on? We learned to realize that they celebrate a Sabbath every single Friday. So everything in the town is closed. And so what our team did was that we also celebrated a Sabbath. And that was the first time for me to ever celebrate that. And it's just a time of rest. And so it took me to go across the world to learn what it means to rest, which I think is super cool. And so I think something that God taught me was that the first Sabbath, our team every week had we either went and played kickball and spike ball, or we went around the town during the Sabbath just to kind of rest and recharge with the team. But the first Friday, I was sick. The Middle Eastern food didn't go down super well the first week, and kind of got a big fever, and the rest of the team was gone. And so, all right, Jared. So I think like I was in the apartment, and I was feeling pretty sick, and it was the first week of that trip was kind of a honeymoon phase. You know, you're excited about being there, everything's new, and it was kind of getting to the time where the honeymoon phase was over, and I was kind of like, what am I doing here? I still have like 35 days left, but who's counting? And I was like, oh my goodness. And I was sitting on the couch, and it was an hour where the Lord was like screaming to me, like, JJ, like, you're tired and worn out, like, just rest, like, chill out. And so I think it was really cool that I was reading a passage about how the Lord went to a place called the Eremos, and what the Eremos is the Greek word for the wilderness, and it's a place that Jesus went to often in his life to like rest and recharge and kind of have life and find his grounding and find his feet. And so I think for me, I just learned what that means and how to rest, which is just really cool. And it's funny, it took me to go across the world to learn that. And you're probably wondering, okay, how in the world do I get there to the Middle East? Do I just buy a plane ticket and that's it? And there's a good long process, but I think the first choice you have to make is this something for me? And so for me, honestly, when I first heard about the trip to the Middle East, I was like, not for me. Like, I just don't really have a heart for those people over there. But it probably got mentioned to me like 7 or 8 times within like 2 weeks. Like my discipler was like, hey, did you hear about this trip to the Middle East? And then they brought it up at Real Life, and I was like, okay, like this trip's a thing, that's cool. Again, not for me. And then there was a Real Life where they talked about discerning God's will. And for some reason, on the top of my note page, I just put discerning God's will - Middle East ? And I was like, oh, why did I write that? And yeah, I think that next month, just really discerning, like, okay, even though I'm not like jumping to go to the Middle East right away, like this might be something for me and it could really challenge me. So even if you're not even thinking that part of the world is cool or whatever, or anything like that, or you're not like necessarily interested right away, like give it another thought. So that's what I did, and it really was a life-changing trip.
Yeah, so I definitely relate to that too. It was just mentioned so many times, and just hearing it a lot and then having that tug on my heart was what made me want to go as well. So I didn't really have many expectations going into it. It was one of those things where I just kind of go along, and then it didn't hit me until I was there. But it was so cool to see God change these people that we met over the course of 6 weeks. So if I could challenge you guys to just remember one thing today, it's that God has a place for you, and that's for you to discern, whether that's in the Middle East or that's elsewhere. I want you guys to just pray about that. I encourage you to pray about it. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. You guys have staff and students who have been through this as well. So yeah, I just ask that you guys talk to them, talk to us.
Yeah, so there'll be a vision trip coming up this winter break. And if you're just trying to see like, all right, what's it like over there? I think it's like a little under 2 weeks, the trip. And so, yeah, a staff member will be leading that. Yeah, come talk to us. We'll be here during free time and all weekend. Another cool opportunity for this next summer is going to be recapped in a video coming up. So here you go.
I just thought about how those kids are diving down deep into lakes, and like they probably have this pressure on their head, and like even knowing that like some of the nights they slept on the nets that they fished with, and I was laying in my bed complaining about a headache. And I said, Lord, like you've used me in so many different ways with IJM on my campus, but like I need you to physically send me to Ghana.
I've become very aware of how tangible the gospel is.
Our main focuses are coming alongside International Justice Mission and the Aftercare Center with children who are rescued from slavery, but also doing evangelism and training on a college campus.
And it has been one of the most gratifying experiences to be able to pour into them in the way that I've always wanted to, in a way that just is focused so much on loving, not pity, not education for education's sake, but love.
I had never previously been interested in a summer mission. I just thought, you know, that's not for me, that's more, you know, other people, like campus evangelism has never been my strong suit, so I figured, you know, like I'll let other people do that.
And so the idea is that we would see the intersection of justice and evangelism and see how they're not two different ends of the spectrum of Christianity, but in reality, both close to God's heart and even
fit together.
The point of the project is to have justice in Ghana. It also leads to justice in our own communities.
Blessed are the ones who suffer violence, still have strength to love their enemies.
We're gonna lose terribly.
Blessed is the faith of those who persevere. For though they fall, they'll never know defeat. The kingdom is yours. Yeah, the kingdom.
It just hits you, wow, everything has changed. And it makes the work for justice so much more meaningful when you see that there's really a redemption that is coming, a redemption that is global, that God wants us all to be a part of.
Keep your eyes on Him. The kingdom is
Yeah. You guys, we are so excited to tell you about this summer opportunity. You've heard about a winter break opportunity and spring break opportunity. We're going to get you thinking even farther in the future about a summer opportunity. Gretchen and I have been asked to lead the Ghana Summer Mission, which you got a little bit of a glimpse of. We've led summer missions over the last 30 years and enjoyed each and every one of them. They're awesome opportunities. And most of those are to focus on the campus, reaching the campus, college students, reaching them for Christ. College students are awesome. We think they're awesome. You guys are awesome. You guys know how awesome you are. We're excited about that part of this. But we're also going to be able to partner with IJM, International Justice Mission, and work in an aftercare center where boys have been rescued out of the fishing industry and have come there for restoration, for healing. Another part of this project is also to get a better understanding of race, and particularly the African slave trade. So we'll be visiting slave castles and learning more about that, because that's an important piece. When I think about this project, I think about Shalom. I think about what Emma talked about yesterday, that we're bringing healing and restoration to this community. We're beginning on the college campus because we believe that those students need healing and restoration in their own lives, but they're also going to be the future leaders of Ghana and can affect systems and can affect institutions and can change the country, bring shalom to the entire country. And then obviously we're going to be bringing shalom and healing and peace to these boys. So we're super excited about it. I'm going to have Gretchen tell you a little bit more of the details.
Yep. This is a quarter school friendly mission trip. So the dates are right now June 17th to July 22nd. So it starts after Cal Poly graduation. And we'll be spending part of the time at the Aftercare Center and part of the time at the University of Ghana in Accra, and mixing both of those. We are specifically looking for students who have music background and can play sports with these boys. You saw some of them getting destroyed at soccer. It would be so awesome if we could bring some soccer players.
And beat those guys. No.
We're not going to beat them.
That's not the point.
We're not going to beat them. But we're going to be trained in and doing some sports therapy and some music therapy as a way of helping in their healing and restoration. So we would love to talk to you more about it. And what we would love for you to do is to pray about it, of course. And then you can talk to us. We'll be here this weekend. We'll be on campus. You can message us if you ever want to just talk more about it. If you go to cru.org and search Ghana Summer Mission, it'll be the first thing that pops up. And so there will be a link, and you can read the information that we have about it right now. And if you want to start an application process, you can do it through that. Anything else we need to say?
I think that's great. Yeah, I think just start praying about it. I think what JJ shared about the process, just open your heart. And often God doesn't lead, but sometimes he does, and we want to go where he leads.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone who shared about opportunities that we can get involved in with summer missions. Can we get a round of applause for everybody again? Yeah, great job. Yeah, thank you so much. And now we're going to transition into a time where Emma's going to speak. So can we invite Emma back up?
Yeah, last night was really encouraging and just great to hear the Bible in one narrative. So thank you so much. I'm excited to hear you speak again. Is that okay if we pray for you?
Yes, I love that you guys pray for me. Sorry. We're a team. We're going to Ghana to beat people in soccer. Let's go. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
That was the goal.
That was the goal, Jamie. I love it. Just kidding.
All right. Lord, we just thank you so much that Emma's here, that you are just blessing us with her presence. I pray that tonight it would be your words and your message. Thank you for the gift that you've given her, that she's deciding to share with us, Lord. And I pray that you would soften our hearts. We come with open hands and open hearts. We love you so much. In Jesus' name,
Amen. Thanks, guys. Appreciate you. Dude, can I send some of my athletes to Ghana? Jamie, right? I'm like, dude, I'd love to go on that. Or at least send athletes on it, especially if you're looking for sports. So, anyways, how are you guys doing today? Did everyone get sleep? No, we didn't. It's fine. I know how this life goes. Also, there's some of you probably who weren't here last night. Is that true? How many of you were not here last night? Oh, not that many. You guys made it. I was like, this fire, this traffic sounds a little bit crazy. So if you weren't here last night, but it sounds like most of you were. So some of what we talked about last night was being rooted in the story of God, rooted in this drama of Scripture that is, right? And so it's from there that we understand the good news from the story. It's from the story that we understand who God is, and it's from the story that we see our missional calling as bringers of shalom. Like, that's why I love hearing about this trip that you guys that you have the opportunity to go on. And shalom being, right, you guys remember I said this last night, universal flourishing, delight, wholeness, the way things are supposed to be. And so this morning, I want to camp out a little bit in that, but what could it look like for us to be shalom bringers, right, to this world? If that's our missional calling, what does that mean, that we're shalom bringers? So I actually want to read to you something out of Isaiah 11. So if you have a Bible, you could follow along. It's verses 1 through 9. But if you don't, just listen. And I want you to listen to what I'm about to read because it sounds a little bit wild. Like, it sounds kind of cray-cray. You know what I mean? So listen with me. Okay. There shall come forth from the shoot of the stump of Jesse, and a branch from his roots shall bear fruit. And the Spirit of the Lord shall rest upon him, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and might, the Spirit of knowledge and the fear of the Lord. And his delight shall be in the fear of the Lord. He shall not judge by what his eyes see, or decide disputes by what his ears hear, but with righteousness he shall judge the poor, and decide with equity for the meek of the earth. And he shall strike the earth with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips he shall kill the wicked. Righteousness shall be the belt of his waist, and faithfulness the belt of his loins. All right, listen to this part. This part sounds wild. The wolf shall dwell with the lamb, and the leopard shall lie down with the young goat, and the calf and the lion and the fattened calf together, and the little child shall lead them. The cow and the bear shall graze, their young shall lie down together, and the lion shall eat straw like the ox. The nursing child shall play over the hole of the cobra, and the weaned child shall put his hand in the viper's den. They shall not hurt or destroy in all my holy mountain, for the earth shall be full of the knowledge of the Lord as waters cover the sea. That sounds wild, right? So what I'm struck by in this chapter is this vision of restoration and peace that the prophet Isaiah gives us in verses 6 through 9. right? And you see, y'all, just listen. When you start to read scripture, you hear threads of the story all through it, right? But this promise, this picture of a restored Israel in the reign that is to come, restoration, right? The final chapter we talked about last night. We are invited to imagine a reality where there is no violence or death. And so the prophet here is literally talking about animals that we know today as predator and prey are about to lie down together, right? Children, like the predator will not eat the prey. I'm like, that's weird. Children who would be in danger of being harmed by these animals, they'll actually lead these animals. Like, oh, this is my pet. That's at least how I envision it. Carnivores and herbivores will graze together. They won't eat one another. Infants and children will play near venomous snakes, and they won't be harmed. As a matter of fact, nothing will be harmed or destroyed. Every person and every animal, even the smallest and the meekest, will be secure. Why? Because it says, for the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the Lord as waters cover the sea. And so this vision of peace takes us full circle all the way back to the way it was supposed to be in creation, the story, threads of the story all throughout Scripture, right, to the way it was supposed to be at the beginning of time. And now we're left to just imagine this community of peace where all of its inhabitants can live as they fully were made to be. As they fully were made to be. But here's the thing. This is life before the fall. We know that that's not life now. And this is a vision of life and restoration when the heaven and earth are one again, right? When the new creation comes. This is not our now. Clearly, this is not our now. And so these words from the prophet Isaiah, when I read this, I'm like, they seem as idealistic and imaginary from like a kid's show that lack any trace of reality. Honestly, when I read this, I was like, I think of Jurassic Park. Y'all know the T-Rex? And I was like, this is like a picture of the T-Rex cuddling the goat. You know what I mean? Like, I was like, this is crazy. And so the question that I want to ask today, because I think about it a lot, is how do we live with these seemingly outlandish visions of peace in mind? How do we do this? Right? Because Jesus said these famous words in the Beatitudes on his Sermon on the Mount. He said, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons and daughters of God. Right? So the question, how do we, the people of God, how do we embody the space where the lion and the lamb, right, the calf and the lion, the cow and the bear, the wolf and the lamb dwell together? How are we supposed to embody that space? How do I carry a shalom-bearing presence into divided, polarized disunity, into unspeakable suffering, from disease to death to deportations, from mass shootings to shootings of unarmed men and women of color, right, from abortions to abuse to depression and anxiety, from poverty to genocide, and everywhere in between that and around. Everywhere in between and around that. And I gotta be honest, I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to do it. None of us know how to do that, except for to look to the one who embodies this tension in his very being, right? Because he, that dude, Jesus, is the great I am. He is the Lion of Judah and the Lamb that was slain. He is the resurrected King who offers life to the full by inviting us into death. No big deal, right? And like I said last night, he's broken into the middle of history and the kingdom has come, but it ain't here yet. Talk about tension. He embodies it in who he is, in how we live. He embodies it. So what I think that we see from Jesus' life is that as he lived into and he pressed into tension all around him and bearing in that tension, he embodied this outlandish vision in Isaiah. He embodied this vision of the lion and the lamb together by rooting himself in tension. And I'm like, none of us want to root ourselves in tension. That don't sound fun, right? But in following his lead, living in tension, making a home in tension is one of the ways God calls us to carry a shalom-bearing presence. It's one of the ways that God calls us to do it. So I want us today to look at Jesus' life and talk about a few things that we need in order to be able to root ourselves in tension, that we might faithfully bear witness to Christ in following Jesus' lead. So, we're going to just go into it. Let's talk about it. So one is that what I see from Jesus' life is that living in tension requires eyes to see, which sounds super basic and super simple. But I think of the story in Luke 8 where Jesus shows compassion to a woman who's been struck with illness. And she's been bleeding for a long time. And she spent all that she had on doctors who couldn't heal her. Actually, her sickness got worse. And her material poverty was paired with emotional and spiritual poverty from being labeled unclean for so long. And her disease had robbed her of her livelihood, and it's ruined her reputation because everyone has seen her as unclean. But out of her desperation, she touches the bottom of Jesus' cloak. You guys have heard this story, right? She touches the bottom of Jesus' cloak, and she's healed. And after he healed her, he stops, and he turns, and he looks at her, and he sees her. And he sees her poverty. And he doesn't just see her, but he actually has everyone else see her too. And he not only heals her sickness and her disease, her physical poverty, but he gives her a platform to be restored socially too, to restore her reputation, right? So eyes to see, what I'm specifically talking about is the margins of our culture. Do you have eyes to see the margins, those who they've been decentered in our culture, in our communities, the people who have been pushed to the shadows, so to speak? And so there are many, many types of margins in our communities. There's many. Do you see the poor in your city? Do you see people experiencing homelessness in your city? Do you see the undocumented and the refugee among you who have probably, most likely, all the time have fled dangerous situations at home just for a shot, just for a chance at flourishing for their family? Do you see them? Because eyes to see pushes us to engage politics for the flourishing of all and not just some. Eyes to see will push us to see politics for the flourishing of all. Do you see the elderly in your community? Because the elderly, they're often the ones who have been pushed to the margins because they're too much of a reminder that all of us are on a journey where our bodies are dying. So no one wants to center the elderly in our community. It's too hard to do that. Do you see black and brown bodies filling our prisons? Do you see black and brown bodies that are filling our prisons? African Americans and Latinos make up over 58% of all incarcerated people. If you don't have eyes to see, if you're not looking with eyes to see, you would see that statistic and you could think that black and brown people are just more inherently bad or more inherently criminal or prone to crime and violence than others, which would be wildly untrue, wildly unbiblical, right? That would not be true, but you will miss it without eyes to see. You'll miss it. Do you see the unpopular? Do you see the unpretty? Do you see the unwanted and the unincluded on your campus, in your community? Because eyes to see will lead you to those people and to those places. The unpopular, the unpretty, the uninterested, the unincluded, the unwanted. Can you even see the ethnic minorities in your movement or in your churches or on your campus who are often one of the only ones, right? Who might feel isolated or alone or misunderstood because they're constantly navigating majority spaces as a minority, or they're constantly seeing images of beauty and professionalism in the media that don't affirm their blackness or their brownness, that don't affirm their hair texture, or they don't affirm their worship style or their leadership style. Do you see the world through these eyes? Can you see that? And eyes to see, it doesn't just mean who you see, but it actually also means how you see. Because something that I know, that I've learned, is that if we live in this country, if we live in the United States of America, our American eyes make it very hard for us to see anything collectively or communally. It's just the air we breathe as Americans, as living in this country. It's an individual air. It's just part of our culture. And so when we think about the brokenness of sin, if we cannot acknowledge our super individualistic lens in our culture and train our eyes to see sin systemically and structurally, it will be hard for us to see that there are any problems at all. But that is the air we breathe. It's how we see. Because our natural go-to as Americans is going to be personal piety. It's going to be to look internally and individually and say, I internally am okay because I am personally not racist. But be able to ignore how there's systems and structures that we participate in just by doing business as usual, just by being. That's a part of who we are. But here's what Dr. Carl Ellis says, and he's like one of my favorite theologians. But he says, there is no righteousness in the land if the people have an A+ in personal biblical piety and an F in biblical social justice. Right? We have to train our eyes to see communally and not just breathe the air of individualism that we're all breathing every day anyways. So secondly, living in the tension requires a supernatural amount of empathy, a supernatural ability to share in the feelings of another and to enter into someone else's pain as it were your own. Right? And I think of John 8 when the Pharisees, they brought a woman caught in adultery to Jesus. And in the law of Moses, the punishment for her would have been to be stoned to death. But I think this is one of the most empathetic acts of Jesus in the Gospels, because he doesn't just stand outside the commotion and try to reason with the Pharisees, but he puts himself right in the center of this conflict. He enters right into the center of this tension of life and death for this woman, right in the center of it. And he makes this statement that I think gently leads the Pharisees into a more empathic response than just stoning her to death. Because here's what he says: let any one of you who is without sin be the first to throw the stone at her. And it seems that immediately, one by one, each person connecting to their own sinful humanity, right, realizing none of them were without sin, they dropped their stones and they left. Right, I love what Dr. Brené Brown, if y'all listen to her, she's kind of dope. She's really smart. But I love what she says about empathy. She says, empathy is a choice. And it is a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. And Jesus constantly made these choices to walk straight into people's sin and sickness and death and pain and be so, so present. And because we know he was fully human, as he was fully God, he could connect deeply with the depths of human pain. And then he invited, in this story, the Pharisees to connect with something in themselves too, which led them to set aside their judgment for a moment and drop their stones. Here's the thing, for some people, empathy is really, it's this God-given gift. Like, there's some of you in this room who are probably so empathetic, and you don't really have to try. God really made you that way. But for some folks, empathy is a discipline that we have to pray and ask God to give us in a greater measure so that we can lean into uncomfortable tension and embody a long-suffering love. We have to pray for God to give us supernatural amounts of empathy, because we all don't just have it. And here's what else I say about empathy is that empathy doesn't skeptically look for a reason behind tragedy. And here's what I mean when I say that. So I have a married couple at my church that I'm really close with. And 2 years ago, their sister died in a car accident, crushed their family. And so as they're walking through this, one of the things that people sometimes would ask them would be, oh, well, was she drunk? As if the answer to that question was going to help them decide whether they wanted to grieve with these friends or not. That's kind of ridiculous, right? But here's where we see this happen all the time, where I've experienced it, and I wonder if you have too. when unarmed black men are shot and killed. And instead of this empathetic response to grieve the loss of death for people who are grieving, like they see that's either their family or they see themselves in this person who got shot, the question is, well, what did he do? Because he must have deserved it for that to happen. And that is a very unempathetic response, right? That is not, empathy doesn't look for reasons behind brokenness and tragedy that happens. Empathy also doesn't mean that you have to fully agree with someone. Empathy doesn't mean that, but it does mean that you will be a phenomenal listener. And it means that, figuratively, you'll crawl into their darkness with them and you'll share their pain, right? And when I say that, I think of one of my dearest friends at my church back home, who's a deacon at our church, and he serves faithfully and leads so many teams on our church. And he just came out to his parents last week. And he's gay, and he's known it since he was 12 years old, and he's in this super broken space of wrestling and being like, I can't stay the way I've been for the last 25 years, and I might step down as a deacon, and I might have to leave the church, but I want to stay. There's just this really messy space of wrestling. And in my heart, I know what I want for him because I believe in where life comes from. But empathy doesn't tell him what I want, right? Empathy is me listening and me being willing to be in a wrestle with him and to wrestle with the things he wants to wrestle with him, to listen and to enter into the pain that he's walking through right now, right? That's a commitment to tension, is to not sway people to what you want, but to be in the pain and wrestle with them, right? That's a commitment. Because peacemaking calls us to suffer with, and we can't love the sufferer without empathy. We cannot do it. And empathy can't coexist with skepticism and judgment. It can't. So we have got to be empathetic. We've got to ask God to give us a greater measure to do this. Thirdly, people also don't love to do this one, but living in tension requires lament. And there are so many moments from Jesus' life where there was lament and passionate expressions of grief and sorrow. But the one that really sticks out to me the most is John 11, when Jesus' friend Lazarus had died. And by the time he got to Judea, Lazarus' sister, Mary and Martha, they both said to Jesus, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. They're crying out to Jesus. And so he goes to Lazarus' tomb where Lazarus had been dead for 4 days already. And so it would have started to smell of decay. And he gets to the tomb and Jesus weeps. He just weeps. And then he looks up and he prays to the Father and he says, Lazarus, come out. And Lazarus walks out. And even though Jesus knew, he went to that tomb knowing he was going to bring him back to life. He knew that he would walk up to the tomb and ask Lazarus to come out. And Lazarus, fully restored and fully given life, would walk out. And even though he knew he would do that, he still wept over his friend. He still wept over his friend. And I just think for us, even though we know Jesus is going to come again and do that same thing, one day he's going to come and make all things new and restore all of life and wipe every tear from our eyes. Will we weep with others until that day comes? Will we weep with others until that day comes? Will we cry out in lament and weep in suffering and injustice and death? Will we lament all these things we see around us that are happening, that are painful, that are killing, that are taking people's bodies, right? Disease that's attacking and killing our fellow image bearers. Will we weep and grieve and lament over that, even though we know that the restoration of all of life is coming? But will we have a commitment to that? Because here's what Dr. Soong-Chan Rah, he has a book called Prophetic Lament. And here's what he says in it. He says, lament is honesty before God and each other. If something has truly been declared dead, there's no use in sugarcoating that reality. To hide from suffering and death would be an act of denial. If an individual would deny the reality of death during a funeral, friends would be justifiably express concern over the mental health of that individual. In the same way, should we not be concerned over a church that lives in denial over the reality of death in our midst? We have to be able to acknowledge death, and we have to be able to lament and cry out. Because to live faithfully in tension in a time where death has been given reign for now, but it won't always be that way, we have to figure out how to lament together. We have to give the sufferer the gift of lamenting with them. We have to do it as the body of Christ. And then fourthly, living in the tension requires, this is also more of a negative feeling that not everyone loves to feel, but living in the tension requires righteous anger. And I'm not talking about anger that leads you to violence or violent actions, violent words, or violent social media posts for that matter. I'm not talking about that, but I'm talking about an anger that leads you to advocate for the sake of others. Right? So Mark 3, Jesus gets real righteously angry in the New Testament, if you guys have read through it. But Mark 3, Jesus went to the synagogue, and there's a man with a shriveled hand there, and some of the Pharisees were looking for a reason to accuse Jesus. So they're watching him real closely to see if he would actually heal on the Sabbath, because in their law, they weren't supposed to do that. So Jesus said to the man with the shriveled hand, "Stand up in front of everyone." And then Jesus asked the Pharisees, because they're like looking at him like, is he really about to do it? And he says, which is lawful on the Sabbath, to do good or to do evil, to save a life or to kill? And it says he looked around at them in anger and deeply distressed at their stubborn hearts. And then he told the man, stretch out your hand. And he healed it. And the man's hand was completely restored. Right? And so Jesus is pissed. And it says he looks around at the Pharisees with anger, right? And he's distressed because he's like, y'all are more concerned about the law than the heart of the law, right? And he is pissed. And they were more concerned about catching Jesus up than they were about restoring this man's life. So much so that he asked them, is it good to save a life or kill one? He just asked them point blank, and he's mad. Because here's what it is. Allowing this righteous anger to rise up in us is a part of living in tension. Allowing it to rise up in us, not to go cuss someone out on Facebook. That's not what it is, but allowing it to rise up and to feel it, because righteous anger helps us to push against pharisaical actions and act on behalf of fellow image bearers to bring restoration. But it's harder to do that if we can't let the righteous anger rise up in us that leads us to care for other people and not cuss people out. Don't get it twisted, people, right? And then lastly, and this one, again, echoes of the biblical story. We talked about it a little bit last night, but living in the tension requires a view of mission that is holistic. It's why I loved seeing this trip that Jamie and Gretchen are going on, because I'm like, dude, that's holistic ministry, right? Here we go. In Luke chapter 4, Jesus, he came back to his hometown. He came back to Nazareth, where he had been brought up, and he went into the synagogue on the Sabbath, and he stood up there, and he took a scroll from the prophet Isaiah, and he unrolled it, and he started to read it. And here's what he said: "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim liberty to the captives and recovering of sight to the blind, to set at liberty those who are oppressed, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." And then he rolled up the scroll, and he dropped the mic, which they wouldn't have had a mic then, but if he was, that's what he would have done. Dropped the mic and sat down, and he said, "Today this scripture has been fulfilled in your hearing." He's like, today, I'm that dude. The scripture is fulfilled in me. Because Jesus' mission and identity wasn't only about, not only, right, this does matter, and this is mission too, but about evangelism and personal salvation. That's a huge part of mission. It's just not the only part of mission, right? Although we know that it's a part of, it's a huge part of it, right? So Luke 4 shows us, though, that Jesus' mission was holistic. It was to proclaim good news to the poor. It was to set captives free. It was to recover sight to the blind. Your boy's talking about healing. It was to give liberty to those who are oppressed. Your boy's talking about justice. It was this holistic mission. Jesus' life that we saw throughout, right, his ministry on the earth, it was to invite us into the tension of spiritual needs and felt needs. It invites us into the tension of salvation and justice, of faith and deeds. It invites us into both of these things. The spiritual and the physical were not meant to be separated. They are two arms of the same mission to, like we said in the biblical story, to bring all of creation back under the rule and reign of Christ, which was inaugurated in his death and his resurrection. This is the tension Jesus' life calls us to live into. And I'll close with this. If we are living in the tensions of our culture, it's going to naturally create some dissonance. And if you don't know what the word dissonance means, it's like a tension or a clash resulting from two conflicting, disharmonious things. So this dissonance of like, these don't fit. Right? And dissonance can be really disorienting, but I think that dissonance and disorientation are two ingredients that help us to be rooted in tension. To be rooted in tension. And I think they help us to become comfortable being uncomfortable. Do you know what I mean? They help us to sit in this space where it's not comfortable, but there's this place of God calling me to, hey, just make that a home. Just become comfortable in not being comfortable so that we can follow Jesus in embodying a shalom-bearing presence in the world around us. And so I want to transition us into a time of reflection and a time with the Lord. And some of you probably do this, and some of you probably haven't done it, and you're like, this is kind of weird. But don't fret. It's not. All we're doing is trying to make a space for you to go, and if you have a journal, this would be a good time to have it. Or you don't have to journal. Just sit there and reflect on who this dude Jesus is, who calls us to sit in uncomfortable tension as a part of bringing shalom to the world. Right? One of the things I would suggest is take some time and read through some of the Gospels and find these places and these stories where Jesus shows up with eyes to see. Right? I only shared one, but in each section, but with eyes to see. Where did Jesus show up with supernatural empathy? Where did he show up with righteous anger? Where do you see Jesus lament and cry out with expressions of great grief? And how can you see holistic mission in the Gospels in the way Jesus engages, right? And this is the question I would ask yourself as you spend time in reflection and time with the Lord. Ask yourself, Lord, where are you inviting me into becoming comfortable in being uncomfortable? Where are you inviting me, Lord, into becoming comfortable being uncomfortable? So would you guys just grab your things, grab what you need, and in a spirit of silence, go ahead and go find a space and spend, I'm not sure how much time, maybe an hour, 1 hour. You get 1 hour of a time of reflection, a time of read, like I said, like if you want to run on those tracks of the New Testament and read through some of Jesus' life in the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, do that. But let me pray for you, and then when I'm done, just go ahead. You can stay in here. You have the freedom to go anywhere. But let me pray first. God, you are good, and it is a privilege to follow you and be conformed to the image of your Son, Jesus, and it's also so hard because in your life, you entered into so much chaos and so much conflict and so much tension. And God, we're not you. And so that feels so hard. So Jesus, would you spur us on this morning to find those places that feel hard and to sit in them, carrying your presence, Lord, that we may be conduits of shalom in the world. Jesus, would you help us to reflect this morning on the places you're calling us into? You're calling us to be comfortable in being uncomfortable. We love you, Jesus. We ask this in your mighty name. Amen. All right, you guys can go ahead.